However, there is something that could settle this debate of where the Chinese come from once and for all. I'm meeting Professor Jin Li, one of China's leading geneticists. Recently, he led a project that set out to prove that the Chinese evolved independently from everyone else, from Homo erectus, here in China.
Before the project started, I was hoping that I could identify or could be able to find evidence that support independent origin of Chinese in China, because I'm a Chinese and came from China, and through the education process, I always believed that there's something special about Chinese.
He singled out a male genetic marker which only appeared about 80,000 years ago in Africa. So any man who carries that marker must have recent African ancestors and can't be descended from the more ancient Asian Homo erectus. Jin took DNA from over 160 ethnic groups around East Asia. Over 12,000 samples. And so, what did you find?
We did not see any, even one single individual that could be considered as the descendant of the Homo erectus in China. Rather, everybody was a descendant of our ancestors from Africa.
The result couldn't have been any clearer. And how did that make you feel, as a Chinese person?
After I saw the evidences that we generate in my laboratory, I think we should all be happy with that, because after all, modern humans from different part of the world are not so different from each other, and we are very close relatives.
It's great, thank you.
Peace. Welcome to the Knowledge Yourself radio show. My name is Teray Allah.
Peace. Jakil Knowledge Allah.
Peace. Jarul Allah.
And we'd like to welcome you to another broadcast of the Knowledge Yourself radio show on September, what we call Wisdom Born, September the 29th, 2013. And today's show is part 2 of our Seeds of Civilization series. And we titled this Yellow Seeds. So those of you who refer to people as Asians in our culture, we refer to them as yellow seeds, of course, not to be derogatory or anything like that, but there's a whole science behind that. The duty of the 5%, among others, is to unite the seeds. That would be the black, the brown, and the yellow, as well as the culture seed, which are the Caucasians. So we want to tell you that this show, as always, is brought to you by Global Position Solutions, and you can contact them at gpsolutions.net. And also, if you'd like to get in contact with us, you can contact us at www.knowledgeofselfradio.weebly.com, which is actually our archive videos, and it's one of the best ways to view our show. Let's begin with a quote, and this is actually a Japanese proverb, and it says, "For a samurai to be brave, he must have a bit of black blood." Just kind of changed my whole outlook on who the early samurais were, and how we of the darker complexion relate to that family. Did you want to add on to that, God, in terms of the samurais?
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it beautifully. You know what I mean? You know, you generally don't think of samurai as being a black man. You know, at least we're talking black man. And so when I heard that and kind of did some more research into it, it was cool to see, you know, we was holding it down even.
Right.
The samurai swords and all.
Yeah. For me, I mean, it just deals with, you know, the foundation. Like, you know, you got to have a true foundation to have that certain way about you. You know, you see it in different so-called races. You know, you could tell that certain people carry that original blood based on the way that they carry themselves, the certain things that they do, how they speak, you know, those types of things. So I think that, you know, speaks to that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Also, when you look at a lot of like the, you know, because I'm kind of a big fan of the samurai, you know, martial art movies. On the walls in the background, a lot of times you'll see,
For
you know,
sure.
you know, pictures of yellow seeds, but then you'll see pictures of actual black people and
Yeah.
knowledge seeds too. So,
Mm-hmm.
you know, find that interesting. It kind of connects everything for me. You know.
No doubt.
That's a great point. You know, I think many scholars or so-called scholars and researchers, they overlook how important art is in terms of gluing together our civilizations in terms of us being one group of people as opposed to us being sliced and diced under these different names and categories.
Right.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because when you think about it, a lot of times they'll say, well, just because they're black in the, you know, artistic depiction doesn't necessarily mean that they were black. But I think it's important to remember they didn't have photography at that time.
Right.
So detail was very important.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? So they
Right.
wouldn't miss something of that magnitude, you know.
Right. Right.
You know
And
what I mean?
plus, you know, they had other colors.
Right.
You know, I was told to keep it simple. They have other colors.
Yeah, you nailed it on that. True indeed. So we're going to get into the current events today. And I like to begin with an article that came out of Nature.com News, and it's titled African Genes Track Back. So this article was released last month, actually, and it's a really interesting article. And it's titled, again, African Genes Track Back, and it says that method extends archaeological and linguistic data by tracing early human migration. So what this article entails is that many researchers have said that, you know, 80,000 to 200,000 years ago, there was a migration out of what's known today as the continent of Africa, which we call Asia. But what this article says is that there actually was a migration where groups of people returned to Africa. So in other words, most people would say, well, when people migrate out of a country, they never return. But this article proves that, you know, actually there were several migrations over
Right.
thousands of years. They didn't just leave and stay, but they actually returned.
Right.
So I just wanted to read a piece of this where it says that the first humans left Africa some 200,000 years ago, dispersing to populate the rest of the world, but this was not a one-way trip. Some people came back, and it says that scientists say that they have traced a reverse migration that in two steps carried genes from the rest of the world back to southern Africa long before European colonizers arrived. Some of the study in regards to this research is coming out of the Uppsala University in Sweden, and there's a geneticist by the name of Karina Schlebusch, and basically just a quote, it says that it's a really exciting time for African genetics. So it's just interesting to show that, you know, our people were not an isolated group of people, and we numbered in, you know, the millions as far as research has shown.
Yeah.
So just
Yeah.
it just
no,
continues, man.
And as far as you're saying about migration, I mean,
Mhm.
you know, we can look locally. How many people have, like, their families moved from, let's say, from the South, right,
Right.
to, like, LA or something, and then they end up moving back to the
Mhm.
South later on.
Yeah.
All right, so to say that people don't leave one place and then don't come back themselves, or that later on that other generation doesn't return back, just, you know, it doesn't even make sense.
Yeah, and it's funny you mention that because I think a lot of times as scientists they outthink themselves. You know, like
Too smart.
Yeah, exactly,
My mom used to
like-
tell me, "You're too smart for your own kid."
right, like, you know, why wouldn't you kind of look at things from your point of view first
Right.
and say, okay, well, if I left, there's chances are I'd probably come back.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
at some point.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? But
And, you know, I wanted to add on one of the things the article brought out, which was something that Giroux had further solidified in our minds, is that that early, what you would consider genetic marker in human history can actually be traced to the Pygmies, which is one of the oldest groups of our people. and a lot of what you would consider the genetic markers would be directly related to that group in modern day, in modern times. So
They go by
do your
many
research.
many different names. You know,
Okay.
pygmies, negritos,
Cosan.
Kosan, right? And then I think also the San people would be considered pygmy in a sense too. You know, of South Africa. So
Indeed.
yeah.
Okay.
True indeed.
That covers a lot of so-called different groups or races of people.
Yeah, even the individuals who would be the foundation of, you know, South America and Mexico.
Right.
You know, a lot of them have. It's obvious if you look at their height and then some of their features that they, you know, carry that genetic line also. You know, so
Wow. So I wanted to hand it over to Jaquil.
Indeed.
I know you always have some hot news for us.
right.
But let me
Set it
not
straight,
Let
brother.
me not disappoint. So peace.
Peace.
I got a story here. It actually comes from Wavy TV, but it's covered at Infowars.com. It's dealing with the 7th grader who was suspended from school without being at school or without being at school property, right? So he wasn't on the bus, he wasn't at the bus stop, and he wasn't at school. He was at his house, which is relatively 70 feet or so from the school bus, right? From the bus pickup spot.
Bus
and he's
stop,
shooting his airsoft gun into a tree, and he has something behind it to catch the airsoft bullets as they, you know, so they don't pass by and shoot someone's window or some cat die, you know, whatever random stuff could happen. Okay, and so him and this other kid were playing, and a lady called from across the street to complain about a kid shooting a gun, and she says on the 911 call, you guys can listen to it, I'll link it in the Facebook group. She says, yeah, the gun is not real, but, you know, I think something is bad, you should go check it out. So now they not only suspended this kid, but they're talking about expelling him.
Wow, man. Just for playing with a toy gun.
Yeah.
Wow.
At home.
You know, I mean,
On private property.
things are out of control, man. You know, I mean, with the amount of people in the United States who are adults that own firearms, who may be registered or not registered. I mean, for us to attack children is just unconscionable.
There's other stories like that too. There's a girl who got sent home, or a young kid. I'm not for sure if it was a young girl or a young boy, but they made a gun out of their Pop-Tart. And how many times have you know what I mean? Like who didn't take a bite out of the sandwich and was like, "Oh, look, it's a gun," right? Yeah, but apparently, you know, guns are such a bad thing. Although that's the Second Amendment, right? And they definitely thought it was important enough for us to have them. But, you know, I think that's interesting that they're pushing the issue on this. And I have another story I'll cover later as far as the naval base shooting. But just prior, a day actually before that shooting, Obama again made the steps to want to take away guns.
Wow. Well, we
Although he said in the
follow,
beginning,
yeah.
I'm not going to take away your guns.
Right.
It wouldn't be the first time that he said something and then did the opposite.
It would be interesting for people to, you know, when a person is elected into office, especially if they're the commander-in-chief, maybe to keep a calendar and just write down specific things that were said over the course of that person's term, and just write it on a calendar.
No, I mean that's important because you think about history in general. You know, history repeats itself because people don't remember what happened in the first place. You know what I mean? So.
No doubt. And it's the same dude who forgot his birthday, mind you. Look that one up.
Wow. Did you have another one for us?
Well, yeah, sure. Let's shoot at it. So, I know you guys are aware of the naval base shooting that just took place a couple of days ago. Just a couple interesting things that I wanted to kind of discuss about that. It's just, for one, this dude had high-level security. Now, I definitely don't have any high-level security. One reason why you may not have high-level security is because you have bad credit. Another reason why you could have not get high-level security access is because you are crazy or complaints against you to the police. For instance, your neighbor, and this is what this guy did. Your neighbor's playing loud music. You're telling them to turn off that loud music. It bothers me. They don't. So you shoot through the wall.
Wow.
Yeah. And then he runs around screaming that the government is attacking him, sending ELF waves into his brain to attack him. Now, this is the same person who got fired from one branch of the army, hired into another branch, given high-level security to work on different weapons like this. So on his side of his gun, which major news, CNN, Fox, MSN, all reporting on the side of his gun, he had, "This is my ELF." Yeah, which I think is interesting. So I don't know if you guys ever seen the Manchurian Candidate with Denzel Washington, but I mean, if this doesn't sound like a real life Manchurian Candidate type situation, I don't know what is.
Right.
Another thing they're linking it to, it's come out just like all these other shooters. The guy was on psychotropic drugs, right? Which on the insert we talked about before say things like they'll make you go crazy, they'll make you want to plan mass murders, they'll make you suicidal. Right, so all these things that they do, and this is something I didn't know about before I did some research. First-person shooter games like Doom,
Call of Duty.
Call of Duty, things like that, were designed by the Pentagon to help people have more of a shoot-first kind of mentality. Yeah, so it's actually a training tool. And in fact, I want to say the game is called Delta Force. A friend of mine worked on that, and he had some another game where another situation where you had to have some kind of clearance. So there were people who had certain crimes in the past where they couldn't work on that game because they didn't get the clearance to work with these high-level officers, Army officers who were coming in to make the game realistic. Yeah, so I definitely know firsthand experience that government, Pentagon do make video games to train their soldiers and to kind of inoculate the people and get them used to those kind of things.
And so, most soldiers will, testify to that fact. One of the things that really disturbed me in terms of the naval-based shooting is the fact that they immediately put this media out just to kind of show the scenes from the shooter, doing his thing. And what I like to say is that for all of the things that America complains about in the media, people are so quick to put violence, on the mainstream media, making it very accessible to people, and it's just not something that I think is healthy to broadcast. We know it happened. A killer was on the loose.
Right.
And that's the only news story I need, whether he's at large or he's dead.
Right. Did you get him or not?
Right. That pretty much, that's the only closure I need. But for me to go back and review a tape and look at that, I mean, for some people, unfortunately, it becomes a sick form of entertainment.
Yeah.
Yeah, like Rome back in the days with the gladiator events and watching people get torn up by lions. Another interesting side thing is that the police, or the military police, showed up within 5 minutes. They were actually suited and trained because they were out on practice missions or whatever. So they had live ammo. They were ready to go. They showed up and they get told to stand down. Yeah, and this is actually for the first time because prior to this, when you tell people these things, they're like, you're a conspiracy theorist, you're crazy. And you're like, but no, it really happened. You have to go look. But so now Fox News, I have an article from Fox News right now that talks about it. CNN is also covering it because the guy actually, the captain went out and was like, hey, for whatever reason, these dudes told me to stand down for 45 minutes. I couldn't do anything. They could have easily walked. And another interesting thing is it was a gun-free zone.
What?
So and so this is what I don't understand is how do you have people who are trained to use a weapon not have access to a weapon, and then have to have certain people who have access to weapons protect people who could protect themselves, right? Which goes back to like the Second Amendment. That was your whole point. Is okay, you have weapons because you should be responsible people and protect yourself. That's not the government's job, the police job to protect you. You protect yourself,
Right.
But you're not allowing people to protect yourself. And in all these places where you cannot protect yourself, i.e. gun-free zones, we have people dying.
Right.
It should actually say kill-free or kill zone instead of gun free zone. Call it what it is.
Because that's exactly what they're promoting these days. That everyone be killers. You don't hear too many people in the military advocating peace until after some sort of military campaign is carried out. You'll always hear the word peace. We brought peace to the country. This will be after the military campaign.
After millions of dollars in bombs.
Right. And if you ask individuals who live in that country if they're at peace, they'll probably say the opposite.
Right.
So.
Indeed. Thank you for that, Jacques. Let's give it over to Jerul.
Oh yeah, my current event's a little bit off. I guess topic as it relates to what the God was building about, but I mean it ties in. It all everything's connected. So, if you look at Shaquille O'Neal, he actually just became part owner of the Sacramento Kings. Now, I mean that's good because Blackman is part owner of an NFL NBA team,
right.
And if you do the knowledge of the show that we did, that relates to sports and modern day slavery, you could see that
He's also a traveling man.
Right. There's a limited number of owners that are of black or brown, yellow descent. So
you built about that in the previous show.
Yeah. So due to knowledge of that in the archives. But what's interesting to me is that Shaq is basically going around, and he's almost like the face. When he's only a part owner, but he's the face, and he's the one kind of softening people up. Specifically softening people up to the idea of a moneyless arena. The world's first moneyless arena. What does this mean?
What does that mean?
You go up into the arena. You don't need to bring cash. All you got to do is take your phone, show them, and anything that you need to get from that arena, whether it's food, get in, all those types of things, you can just do it with your phone. Why is this deep? Because if you pay attention, inevitably there's not going to be any paper currency anymore. So it seems like this is a precursor to get people prepared for that.
For our generation, right? It was the introduction to ATM cards.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas our parents didn't. They got their introduction to it was checks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Here, stop carrying money, just write a check for everything. And then for us, it was stop carrying money and writing checks and just use your ATM.
Right.
And now it's going to be, stop carrying an ATM card and just, you always have your phone. Here, use your phone.
Right.
And then it's going to be, well, you don't want to lose your phone. Why don't you just put this chip in?
Exactly.
We do it all for you.
Right.
Yeah. It only makes sense. That's the progression. You're leading someone to that end.
Right. And a big, huggable, laughable, original man is the one.
I mean, I hope maybe he'll do better selling this than he did selling those nasty sodas.
Pepsi.
No, at 7-Eleven he had his own special cream nasty soda. Or something.
Really?
Yeah, I wasn't brave enough to taste it. I looked at it and
I think I missed that one, guys.
I mean, I'm definitely not trying to judge people saying handsome or not handsome or whatever, but Shaq's big head on the soda machine, on a can of soda is not necessarily making me want to drink it.
Wow. So we have any others?
You know what? So on a lighter note, it's funny but also serious at the same time. So in New York City, they got together and 358 New Yorkers participated in making the Guinness World Record for the amount of people twerking. So once you get over that, where it gets kind of interesting, I think, is there's a couple of things. First, they announced this homosexual male, black male, as being a hip hop artist. This person's name is Big Frida, Queen of Bounce. So this person is apparently coming out with a TV show on, I want to say it's not important because you probably shouldn't watch it.
Right. Don't publicize it.
Yeah, I'm not going to do that. So in any event, they got a huge amount of people, 358 people, to participate in twerking. twerking mostly, and they had our black sisters out there definitely being the twerkiness or raunchy kind of looking, showing out. Me personally, I just don't think it's a good use of black women for entertainment.
Right. Indeed.
You know what I mean? It kind of paints them in a certain way.
Yeah.
And then you have a black male who is homosexual leading this whole kind of event. So
Yeah, I think to me it wouldn't be as such a large issue if there was a majority, image, a majority positive image of black men and women. Like if you watch
Yeah.
TV and all you see is distinguished black men, strong, prominent individuals. Same thing with the women. And then occasionally you see this on the other end. Okay, yeah, I could see that.
it would
but-
balance out.
Right.
Right.
But when this is the majority, that's an issue.
Yeah, for sure. And even there's videos and stuff, but when you look at them, or when you see the pictures, it's showing the back end of black females.
Mm-hmm.
To where it's just not showing that because there's definitely other people there. It wasn't just all black people.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing as
LA riots.
Yeah, right.
Right.
It's the same thing as like white people going to Mardi Gras, right?
Mm.
That's not what they normally do. They're just there for entertainment. So when you're in Rome, you do what Romans do.
Mm-hmm.
So when you see these Caucasian people in the crowd, they're painted in a different light, right? They're not with the low booty shorts, or not that those people weren't there. They just weren't shown, right? But the ones that they did show, were dressed conservatively, right? And they weren't showing the back end the whole time. They were just showing them being silly trying to twerk.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas anytime they showed any of the sisters, it was, microphone to the... probably not the catch, but, microphone to the backside.
Right.
And they're watching the booty clap, and the girls pretending to talk, or the guys talking as the booty's clapping and pretending like it's... And, it's like, why didn't you do that to any of the other, the Caucasian women, white women who were there?
Right. I mean, it just sounds like it's another way to promote, the stripper mentality among black women. I think, as it was said, it is definitely a waste of black women's talent. Considering what this show represents in terms that, the black woman is the mother of civilization. So much of what was accomplished over, trillions of years was accomplished through the black woman actually taking a visible and deliberate role in the progress of the human family. And that's the one thing that, what I would consider non-black people should take notes is that, the picture that's been painted of black women in modern times is inaccurate. It's incorrect.
Yeah.
Every single thing that you associate with black women, if it has a negative connotation, it's incorrect. Mm-hmm. That's something that we learned actually growing up or trying to survive in what's considered a Eurocentric culture. Mm-hmm. And that's an actual fact.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a very eye-opening piece of entertainment.
Yeah.
I think that's something I should definitely try to weave into my class at some point. Just to kind of show them how stereotypes are, broadcasted and projected. Right. Because a lot of especially young black women, when they navigate into white society, in some respects, I've been told that there are times when they feel very uncomfortable. And they have no idea why they feel this way. It just seems like everywhere I go, people stare at me. And the thing is, you really can't determine what a person thinks about you because they're staring at you.
Right.
But considering the media, the history of media, and, in reference to black women, it may not come to, be a surprise to many women that you're being looked at as a sex object.
No doubt.
No
doubt.
So
I was just thinking
really
about that
piece right there.
As far as we did a show about black men and their so-called options when leaving the hood, right? You're either a rapper or a basketball player, right? But so, what are your options as a young black woman for leaving the hood?
You know, yeah, true indeed.
Yeah, and maybe we should just leave that aside because that sounds like an interesting topic.
I think you know how we do. We have everything. I mean, there's so many things that we need to discuss. We haven't even scratched the surface,
Not even.
ladies and gentlemen, and young children. True indeed. So, are there any more current events or no? All right. So why don't we go ahead and take a brief break, and we'll come back and get into the show. Yellow Seeds. Peace.
Peace.
I'm wise and I know what time it is now. To be alive. To be alive. To be alive.
Peace and welcome back to the Knowledge of Self radio show. My name is Teray Allah.
Peace. Jakil Najala.
Peace, Jarulullah.
And welcome to the part 2 of the Seeds of Civilization series, where we talk about what we refer to as yellow seeds. In the modern world, they're commonly referred to as Asians. I want to begin the discussion by saying that, to begin with, if you have a clear understanding of history and original people, you'll understand that there are many different shades of original people on the planet. And I think that's one of the things that this show is going to bring out. For some people, they don't really want to dig too deep and read a bunch of books and listen to lectures, and that's perfectly all right. But let's hit you with the obvious thing that ties original people together. Let's look at phenotypical traits. Black hair is a clear indication of what would be considered the dominant gene in man and woman, as well as brown eyes. Some would say even black eyes or dark eyes is also a really clear piece of evidence of a dominant genetic trait. As soon as people get past this idea of how dark we are or how light we are and begin to look deeper into science through genetics, they're always going to overlook how we all are one group of people, and one member in the human family came later. That would be the Caucasians, and that's something that we built on several shows ago. So to begin this show, let's begin with the questions. Number 1, does science prove that yellow seeds are black? Number 2, were Asia's first dynasties black? Number 3, if yellow seeds are black, then how come their eyes look so different or their skin is lighter? That's a really great question right there. Number 4, Asia is known for martial arts, but who taught them? Number 5, why are we tired of hyphenating the names of original people. For example, Black Chinese. Number 6, in what ways were yellow seeds exploited and still being exploited in this day and time? Number 7, why are Mongolian spots an important indication that black, brown, yellow, and red people are one and the same? Number 8, what contributions to civilizations have yellow seeds made beginning in ancient times? How do these contributions parallel what original people have contributed to other parts of the planet? And finally, number 9, how were the Opium Wars used by the colored man? Is it all right if we kind of build on number 5? Why are we tired of hyphenating the names of original people, such as African American, Hispanic American, Chinese American, Japanese American? Why are we tired of hyphenating our people's names?
I just simply see it as, it just denotes difference, and as opposed to denoting something that deals with similarities, or seeing us as one people. It deals with separation.
Right, no doubt. Yeah, even to add on, I say a big part of it, how I see it too, is going back to the slave times, right? They separated us based on skin, tone, and language, right? And so why would we continue to use those same things that they used to separate us in that day and time to separate ourselves from each other? You know what I mean? So they kind of just started the wheels going, and then we oiled it and maintained it and doing it ourselves now, almost.
I mean, it's just the equivalent of saying short man, tall man. We don't walk around and call men, hey, you dark, short man. We say, hey, man, come over here.
Right.
So it seems like you're trying to create a subspecies of a group of people that really you can't classify as a species.
Right.
So I think the fact that people still walk around saying, they're African American as opposed to black, not only is it an identity crisis, but also, we do have to look at the direction education has gone within the last, let's just say the last 600 years. It really hasn't been information that has been shared with the masses and put in schools to where people have walked away with the reality that, hey, you know what, this is valid, this is true.
Right.
Right. So, it's just one of those things that really bothers me, man.
No doubt. Just to add on to that, I posted a video in the Facebook group, Ivan Van Sertima. And at the end of that little interview, he talks about how he went to a college just specifically to learn about African and Chinese culture, right? And he said the madness that he learned there in his first year made him want to kill himself, and he drank poison.
Wow.
Because just what they taught him was just absolute madness. And he was like, wow, even here at a school where it's designed for me to learn about my people, they're still teaching me madness.
Wow, that's a striking statement right there, man. That's astonishing.
And I think that's a lesson in that, though. Instead of going to others to learn about yourself, you got to look at yourself to learn about yourself. You know what I mean?
True indeed. Well, we're going to begin our discussion with China and China's ancient civilization. Of course, one thing that you need to be aware of is that there is an exorbitant amount of information about any civilization that we created on the planet. And we encourage you, when you hear certain names mentioned, that you do your own follow-up research, because we could spend actually a whole month just talking about one particular person or dynasty. So we're just going to give you some bits and pieces so that you can put together as to why the so-called Asians are actually original people, or what we refer to as black people. In our research, one of the things that came out was the study about the Peking man. And the Peking man was found in the 1920s. And specifically, what they attempted to at least prove from this finding is who the modern Chinese people's ancestors were. So from this finding that came out, it says that the Peking man represents the spread of a new species of hominid, okay, which they refer to as Homo erectus. And it's also stated that in an earlier out of Africa migration, quote, beginning about 1 million years ago. So these fossils that they found, they were able to date them between 800,000 and 400,000 years old. Now, the interesting thing about this is that the Peking man proves that modern Chinese are direct descendants of people in Africa. And this was according to the findings that was formed in Africa around 200,000 years ago.
Wow.
Okay, so that would be one of the first pieces of evidence that we want to hit you with in terms of how we all have this connection. If you go up and you ask some Chinese people, because there are some Chinese people who will tell you, yes, we know that. But you may find a select few Chinese people who will shake their head until their neck almost breaks, telling you that they in no way have a connection with Africa and that, you know, we're not all related on the planet Earth. But again, we do have the Peking man, and we encourage you to look into that a little bit more. Why don't we get into some of the other specifics of this? I want to go into the 3 major dynasties. The first one being referred to as the Shi dynasty. That's spelled Xia. It's hard pronunciation, man. It reminds me why I didn't study ancient Chinese civilization when I was younger, man. Which was around in the year 2205 to 1766 BC. And then you have the Shang dynasty from 1700 to 1050 years. And the Shao dynasty. These were all considered the early black dynasties. And what we mean by the black dynasties, we mean that these particular dynasties flourished in China, but they were also civilizations that came up out of the leadership of people who had direct lineage to Africa.
Yeah.
So anyone want to add on?
Before we go there, I wanted to add on a little bit about the Peking man. One thing I thought that was interesting about them was that, or him, was that, it said that he had sophisticated stone tools and sported a brain 3/4 the size of modern humans. Okay, he walked fully upright also. Now, what's funny to me is that, the size of a brain doesn't necessarily, show how much brain power an individual has, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why is it, if they know this, do they present it in a certain way? Is it to show that Homo erectus is a so-called person that was on a limited basis, didn't have the ability to, be on a certain level with individuals in this day and time?
Right.
Because it's obvious that these were black men and women. You know what I mean?
Right,
So is it to kind of show that?
Yeah, it's deep.
I just find that interesting that they tend to always say, okay, well, the brain size was smaller.
Right.
They use stone tools, but they didn't have the ability to do this, this, and this. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, that's interesting though. From what I understand, and I'm trying to recall the exact date, but I want to say at least a good 1,000 years or so prior to that. They have African civilizations that were melting metal, right?
Yeah.
And so they were doing it in high science. They were heating the air to get these high temperatures that people weren't getting until like recently. Maybe within like the last couple hundred years of our modern times.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and I think
find that interesting to say. You're trying brain size. Yet these people were doing things that we are just barely figuring out how to do.
And we still haven't figured out much of the mathematics that they use to do it.
Right.
How do they move certain objects and certain types of rocks in what's known as primitive civilizations?
Yeah, and I think that's, of utmost importance. Like, you think about a people who's been on the planet for millions of years. You mean to tell me that they're not able to figure out in that much time how to do this, that, and the third?
Yeah.
Whereas you have a certain people who've been on the planet for 6,000 years, and in 6,000 years they're so much evolved that they're able to, create all that we see. Nah, they had the foundation to do so. You know what I mean? They still never did create these things by themselves anyway. So, I just find that stuff interesting.
Right. I mean, and it shows the cooperation of our people in so-called ancient or primitive times.
Yeah.
I wanted to kind of bring this together because we mentioned the Shi dynasty, and there's an interesting YouTube presentation. It's called The Black Chinese. It's under a couple of titles, but apparently the narrator, he breaks down the Black dynasties and the darker of us's relationship in terms of building the earliest civilizations or dynasties in China.
Right.
So I'll just kind of go through it briefly. As far as the Shi dynasty, the narrator says that this was a dynasty that actually flowered in an area he referred to as the fertile African crescent. You could actually find some recent research, and I think the video that we showed at the top of the show is a second confirmation of what has already been broadcasted, the fact that there are millions of people in China which have a gene that is also predominant in people in East Africa. And I didn't bring that, God, that was just something I wanted to bring today. But they also had some archaeologists find these coins. I'm trying to remember exactly where it was in China. That's something that I have to get back to you on.
Okay.
But they found these coins, which were actually coins that were used by either, they say, visitors or people that ruled in that particular part of China, which are only common in East Africa. So, I mean, there's so many things.
Right,
man.
I remember hearing about
They're
that.
still doing that excavation. guys.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
That's deep. It's funny that that you mentioned that, though. I have an article from Los Angeles Times, and it was building about that same thing that you were talking about. So they basically did a study, and people in China, ties in the video that we played, where they took 28 different markers and tested them all down. Yeah, and then they talked about you had that other current event in the beginning where you were building on the migration patterns from Africa, and so they talk about in this article from LA Times how it's actually titled China's Roots Lie in Africa, researchers say. Yeah, so I'll post that. So,
So why are we telling you all of this? The main thing is that Europeans have been successful in hijacking our ancient historical ties. And if you can call one group this name and another group this name, then you're more successful at isolating the group, exterminating the group, and then on the other hand, you develop a certain relationship with another group because you feel that it's going to promote your interests in the world.
right.
So that's what this is all about, to sort of break down those barriers. Huang Di was also an emperor mentioned as being a part of the Black Dynasty, or one who was classified as having African heritage, so to speak. I'm using politically correct terms here, but apparently is a direct link of Africa. And the way that the narrator broke down his name, he gave a couple of different names he was referred to as. So, excuse me, I don't speak Chinese, but it's Huai Wandi and Hunak Kunte. And one of the things he made a point about in terms of Kunte is that is a common name among the Manding speakers. So yeah, you want.
Oh no, we all remember Kunta Kinte, right?
Check out Roots, Kunta Kinte.
Right. You gotta connect those dots, right?
Right.
What was the time frame for him?
Huang Di?
Yeah.
2282 BC.
Okay, so would he? Okay, so yeah, so they also called him Yu the Great, and
You the Great?
You the Great.
Yeah,
Why
sounds
you
like a
the
5%
Great?
degree, you know.
Right.
You the great, brother.
And what I thought
Does
was,
he know the degree?
I'm sure he does. I'm sure he does. What I thought was interesting about him being called You the Great, it wasn't the name that he adopted himself. This is what the people gave to him.
Wow.
Unlike,
Wow.
Alexander the Great and all
Right.
these other
I'm going to call
individuals.
myself the Great, and if
Right.
you don't like it, I'm going to torture you and kill you.
Cut your head off, right?
Uh-huh.
But one thing that he did was basically he developed a system, a hierarchy that was built specifically on the person ability. So you became the ruler of the clan based on your ability, not just
Okay.
because you were, connected
Right.
from your genetics or whatever the case may
You were
be.
someone's son. And,
Exactly. But when he passed, his son actually switched it and made it more of a family thing. Yeah. So
I wonder, like, what are the specifics on that? Like, did his son switch it maybe after he had a son that maybe wasn't so quite fit for the role, and he was like, "Yo, let me change this to my betterment."
Or was it some outside influence?
Right.
That's one of the things that we always kind of hammer into our listeners' heads in terms of how, although it's not stated, we have to remember that there were some outside influences that actually changed the political direction of our civilizations. Man, that's some groundbreaking information.
yeah.
I learned a little bit about a group of people called the Li Men, which is referred to as the black-headed people. And this was another early civilization that flourished near what's known as the Low River in Shanxi, spelled Shanxi.
Okay.
So
That's one thing I
mean,
always liked about
Go ahead,
Chinese
guy.
names, guys. They just sound so cool.
they do, huh? Shanxi.
I grew watching a lot of kung fu movies, so yeah, they always had swift names and stuff.
and I mean, and I know later on we can add on about the martial arts and that connection between what we call the continent of Africa and Asia.
Yeah.
So it's all there for everyone to look at. Last thing I wanted to mention about some of the earliest dynasties, it said that the Shi and Shangli were founded by Dravidian and Manding speakers, whereas the Shanyin was founded by Mongoloids. And these are all what we would consider dark people in our civilizations.
Right.
Now many of you are probably asking, okay, so then if these were people, or these are people that we have a connection with, why do their eyes look so different? And we're definitely going to address that. But we're beginning with the most obvious trait, which would be genetics, okay, which makes us all black. And then we can go into the phenotypical traits later on as we progress.
Well, now you mentioned the Mongol, so I know, was it you guys? You guys were telling me about the Mongolian spot.
Oh yeah. Mongolian spot is something that a lot of original children have. My son actually has it, and it led me to do a little more research on it. But basically, you can find that spot, which it's like a brownish color that a lot of times it's on the back or backside and located in that region. It's pretty large spot, but you can find it in so-called Africans, so-called Chinese, or so-called Asians, so-called Mexicans, and Hispanics.
That's interesting. So it's not unique to so-called Mongolians, as if they were their own people.
Right.
It's shared amongst a wide variety of races.
Yeah. So it's something that you can find in original people.
Wow.
You know what I mean? So I mean that's further evidence to show the connection between us.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. One thing before we moved on, about the, how'd you say it? XAI? Shy? Is it shy?
I just said that the Shi.
Okay, the Shi. XIA. Oh, that's not,
Not gonna
I'm not even going to butcher it. So their decline actually came, and I thought this was interesting based on the parallels of what's going on today. The decline came under the reign of an individual by the name of Jai, Jie. And the reason why they declined was basically he became selfish, and he only cared about his riches on a day-to-day basis. He didn't care about the people, and the only thing that he worried about was fattening his pockets, basically. So you could see, you know, if you look at what's going on here in America today, in a lot of these so-called civilized countries, you have the hierarchy, you know, disconnected with the people, inevitably going to lead to the decline of these so-called great civilizations. You know what I mean?
Wow.
So,
And you got to ask that question: do they receive more gold? You know, and that's another idea of this influence that sometimes was not written about by ancient scholars who were present with their emperors and their kings. You know, no one just kind of wrote a side note. And by the way, there was a European man there who was offering us a deal,
right.
you know, to do this. One thing I wanted to throw into the cipher as well is that when you look into the Hua people, it's spelled H-U-A. It's also spelled HWA. They're also considered Mongoloid people. So those would also be, or that is also a group that contributed to the building of the ancient civilization in China, and they were also dark-skinned people.
Wow. Okay.
You know, if you look at the Mongoloids today, or Mongols, and I have to find out the politically correct term. They probably don't call themselves that, but anyway. They generally live up, if I'm not mistaken, in the highlands of China, and they have a really long and rich history there.
Yeah. No, I was just thinking the Mongolians share the same phenotype with what we call Indonesians or
Malaysian?
no, not Malaysia. That's another one that escaped my mind right now. But basically, they're like the same people. So I was watching this Netflix documentary. I think we have it as a reference. I want to say The Human Tree or something like that. Even they were talking about the migration, people leaving Africa. And so from what I understand from what they're saying, people left Africa and went all the way to Indonesia. And they stopped there. And then, of course, some people, you know, decided, nah, I don't want to go all the way. I'm going to stop here, or I'm going to stop here. But, you know, the majority of the people went from point A to point B. And then, as we talked about, when they traveled back, right, then you have the whole, you know, different mixing.
So you mean they didn't think that the world was flat?
Well, from what I understand, they had high science. So,
okay,
you know, I think they had boats that could just bend.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay,
so that, you know, the flat part, they would just kind of turn with
gotcha,
it.
gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, you know they,
right.
these guys are magical. I'm joking, people don't take that serious.
No, when we get into, when we mention honorable mention of the Ataman people, you know, one of the things that was stated, which is what, you know, the guy just mentioned, you know, boat travel was very common among our people. It wasn't just that. And one of the reasons they gave for this was that some of the people, such as the Atamans, they wound up in the area they wound up in, which would be near Southeast Asia, was because they traveled there by boat from the continent of Africa. And they said that the waters may have been way more shallow than what people are looking at it as you know, nowadays. So in other words, the point was that especially groups like the Atamans, they didn't necessarily walk across the Bering Straits or walk at all. They traveled by boat.
Right.
So,
Which they always try to show our people traveling in these crappy boats, man.
Right.
As if,
Right.
you know, and then, man, I want to say, I don't want to misquote it. Was it maybe National Geographic or something? Some dude made some crappy boat out of leaves and was like, see, look. Well, no, I think he was able to make it or something. Yeah, he was like, oh, see, look, it's possible to do that.
Yeah.
But you're on a boat by yourself, buddy, on, you know, perfect weather conditions.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you could travel a certain distance.
Yeah. No, I mean, they found a lot of boats that are from ancient times, and they actually say that these boats are way more sophisticated than any European sailboat. Reason being is because with a sailboat, the only way you can move is when wind is blowing.
Right.
But these ancient boats had sail and they had manpower. So when the wind stopped blowing, they were able to row.
Right. Come on, people, time to get it in.
You know? So,
man.
Yeah, but no, that's funny that you mentioned the whole, you know, we were talking about boats and people sailing. A story that my martial art teacher shared with me that kind of connects China and Japan as far as martial arts go is there was a Shaolin monk who was traveling by boat. His boat got washed up in Okinawa, and some people there picked this guy up. Now these people had got kicked out of their village by some other tribe people. So this Shaolin guy from China didn't have anything to give them, right? So he taught them martial arts in basic forms. And then that's kind of where you get like the birth of ninjutsu, because they would use that to sneak in to the village, take different shapes and postures, sneak in, not really try and fight, but just go get food so they can survive and come back. Yeah, actually, karate used to mean Chinese hand. Yeah, and then they changed it because Japanese just love Chinese people like that.
And that's an interesting thing, you know, how we're going to share a common history between the Chinese, the Southeast Asian, and the Japanese people, which would be considered Pacific Asians.
Yeah.
And what many of them don't know is that we're linked through a common genetic history. You know, but again, through colonization, and the guy's going to add on about some other important things that took place in China that led to their, you know, civilizations being corrupted. It has a lot to do with the European influence and, you know, what their motives were when they went into these different countries, you know.
Yeah, one thing about the Shang dynasty that I found was they used to inscribe their characters on oracle bones. So that they had one of the earlier, you know, written actual dialects or languages. So a lot of the history that you can find that deal with these ancient dynasties, you can really find with the Shang, because they're really one of the first, as it relates to so-called Asian dynasties, to you know, transcribe their writings and their history. Another interesting point, which if anyone studies a little bit of Kemetic science or the so-called Egyptian religion, the Shang religion was called, or the Shang god was called Shang Di, which means supreme god. And what was interesting about him, I'm going to just read this. The Shang worshipped the Shang Di, who was a supreme god, rain, and other natural forces and places. They also worshipped their ancestors because they believed that although their ancestors lived in heaven after their death, they were still actively involved in the affairs of the family and descendants. The kings communicated with their ancestors using oracle bones and made frequent sacrifices to the that ruled over the lesser gods of the sun, moon, and wind. They ate them, whatever that means. Okay. As in many other societies, they sacrifice animals, blah, 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 blah. To keep 10. They believe that if they failed to properly worship their ancestors, their family and the kingdom would experience many disasters. So if you look at like Kemetic science, you can see a relation. And a lot of actually,
I see you as far as paying
homage to the ancestors and things of that nature and being connected there. But one also thing that stood out to me is the burial sites. A lot of the burial sites were, you know, they would, you know, place a lot of, you know, the riches that individual, you know, I guess acquired in their lifetime with them in the afterlife, you know, in their grave, to take with them to the afterlife. You know, and you could see a connection there.
Right. That's deep.
Wow. I mean, you know, it always comes to you live and direct on the Knowledge of Self radio show. I think that's a really good time to take a brief break, and when we come back, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Southeast Asians. Peace.
I'm going to play that video.
Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge Yourself radio show. My name is Teray Allah.
Peace. Jakil Najallah.
Peace, Jawullah.
And before we left you, we talked a little bit about the Chinese connection in terms of
With Bruce Lee?
genetic. I was waiting for someone to say it, man. True indeed. What's the Chinese connection? Because Bruce Lee was really dark. Okay, don't get it twisted.
Yeah. Oh, yo, they talked about it in that movie. No dogs, no something, and no Chinese at the very bottom.
True indeed. So check out Chinese Connection, man, and look at some of those still photographs of Bruce Lee where he got the super dark tan on him, specifically in Enter the Dragon. First few minutes of that when he's wrestling. Come on, man. You can't deny it. You can't deny us and Bruce have a connection. But yeah, I mean, we are showing and proving that the black man is also Chinese, among other things. The black man is Asian. The black man is quote-unquote African, so that you understand the connection between original people. We're going to have a brief conversation about Southeast Asia. And of course, for those of you who may be from some countries in Southeast Asia that we did not mention, we do plan on doing another show in this series where we address any of the countries that we left out. Okay, so don't be concerned. We're not going to leave you out. We're going to talk a little bit about Cambodia, Laos, and Vietnam. So one of the things, again, one of the most visible connections between our people is the dark skin. And, I lived in the city of Long Beach for a period of time, and it was so interesting to see the Khmer people, and that's what they're referred to as people that come from Cambodia, the Khmer people. And, as time went on, I noticed that there are so many different shades of Khmer people, all from being extremely dark to those being extremely light. So that's one of the main things that stands out in my memory that connects people from that part of the world to our people in a variety of places, specifically the continent of Africa. I wanted to share, just to kind of kick this off, and I'm going to let the guys add on. There's an interesting website. It's called the Genographic, nationalgeographic.com/human journey URL, where you can go and read a little bit more about, the genetic markers and things of that nature that connects our people around the world. But according to this piece of information from this website, it made the connection between Southeast Asians and the early migration of Africa, which started about 70,000 years ago. And I wanted to just read a piece of this where it says that the earliest people to colonize the Eurasian landmass likely did so across the Bab al-Mandab Strait, and that's spelled BAB-AL-MANDAB. So that's the Bab al-Mandab Strait, separating present-day Yemen from Djibouti. So that's in Africa. Djibouti and Yemen, that's all considered Africa. Yeah. They try to call it Arabia now and all these other names, but we know how names go. And it says that these early beachcombers, so these are the people that migrated out of this region about 70,000 years ago, expanded rapidly along the coast to India and reached Southeast Asia and Australia by 50,000 years ago. So there's your connection. It goes on to say that a little after 50,000 years ago, a second group came, and they set out on what was known as an inland trek, and they set out into the region known today as the Middle East and South Central Asia. So that's the connection between Africa and Southeast Asia, which is why you see so many of our people in Asia that have really dark skin, specifically in Southeast Asia as well. So I wanted to give it over to my brothers because I know they wanted to add on about Southeast Asians and how we're all connected in that way.
I actually wanted to read something from this book. African presence in early Asia, Renoka Rashidi, and also co-edited by Ivan Van Sertima.
That's a great book.
Yeah.
You know, piece of my Hung Art instructor, Sifu Donald Humphreys. When I was 16, he gave me that cassette.
Is that right?
Yeah, God,
Wow,
and I had no idea what it was. You know, I took it. I was like, yeah, you know, thanks. And I kind of put it on, and I was like, what's this? I popped it out, and I found it years, months, and days later. And I was like, wow, what a jewel he dropped on me back then.
Yeah.
My bad, guys.
Yeah, there was an area called the Kingdom of Champa, and this is kind of located in that Southeast Asian region, and not too far from Angkor. It's actually one of the greater civilizations of the time. It said the actual name that they called it was Lin Yi, which means land of black men.
Lin Yi.
You know, so I found that to be interesting. The Sanskrit would be Champa. This was in 192 Common Era. So, yeah, that's basically dealing with that portion. But then we got Angkor. You wanna tackle Angkor?
Angkor. Tell me about
Angkor.
Really, what I want to talk about is the people what is now considered Cambodia, Thailand, Vietnam area.
Oh yeah, pardon me. Yeah, Angkor's Cambodia.
Okay,
Yeah,
indeed, that's what they called it. Okay.
Yeah.
Dealing with the older name.
Yeah, I like it. So there was a kingdom of Funan, and so they spell it Funan, but it's probably PHNO Funan, PHOUON. And so basically that was started by an African, straight someone from Africa. And so, you know, talk about connections from people in different lands and how we're all one group of people. And, you know, that was later broken up into different parts, like I said, what we now call Cambodia, Vietnam, and Thailand.
True indeed. So when we talk about civilizations in Southeast Asia, you know, and we would always encourage you to look at a map, look at a world map. And although we know that land masses have drifted over, you know, millions of years, try to bring it together a little bit more and try to determine, you know, why did these different people branch out? I mean, one of the things that has come out in our research time and time again is the fact that many people branched out of, you know, areas that they, you know, I guess ruled or lived in large concentrations. It was primarily because of them following a certain food supply. So whatever that may have been, that was one motivating factor which led people to get on boats, to make boats, and to travel to different places. Now, many people always picture, you know, ancient civilizations as just jumping on a boat and just drifting until they found something. But, you know, no. I mean, if you look at the buildings, such as in places like Angkor and Cambodia, they had specific mathematics that they used to navigate the high seas with. You want to add on, guys?
Oh yeah, speaking of Angkor, one of the most prominent kings of that time was by the name of Jayavarman, and he's said to be Angkor's most prolific builder. And he, you know, if you watch the video on the break, a lot of the structures that you saw were actually built during his reign, and they're still standing today. So you know that tells you a lot about that. So the thing that I thought was interesting, if you look at the structures, generally, if you're a king, you're going to make structures in your own image, right? So if you look at the imagery of the structures, it's clear that this is an original man or a black man. If you look at, you know, the features, right? You know what I mean? So I just thought that was interesting.
Well, they had no other colors.
Oh yeah, that's true.
You know, Crayola wasn't around then, so you know,
right.
They could have ran out of colors. Yeah, no doubt. People definitely represented themselves, you know, accurately. So when you see depictions of, you know, like when you travel and you see pictures of like the Buddha with matted hair, you know, bigger lips and these different features that we know to be African,
Right.
or black features.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't by accident. That
Right.
was definitely by design.
Right. Definitely, yeah. Like one thing people don't really do is look at the back of statues. A lot of that will tell you,
Right.
you know.
Huh.
You're gonna see like dreadlocks. You're gonna see, like you
Right.
said, Buddha with nappy hair.
Mhm.
Even the Olmec heads with the with the dreads or the braids,
Right.
in the back that are obviously African, so-called African style hair dress. You know what I
Right.
mean? So
Right.
it's a big indication of the truth right there.
And if you want to go back into the study, not only pick up the book that the God is reading, but also I know one of the people who was a part of this research in Cambodia specifically in regards to the kingdom of Angkor. So I want to dispel that because I know some people, they kind of look up things right away. It's spelled Angkor. So that's Angkor. And one of the things that came out in a person by the name of John G. Jackson, a researcher, he wrote that, quote, "These Asiatic black men," yes, he did say Asiatic, were in fact the Khmers, and I want to have you write this down, Khners. So when you meet someone from Cambodia, they're going to refer to themselves as Khmer. That's not only what they refer to their culture as, but they also tell you that that is the name of one of their languages, Khmer. It goes on to say, who were the dominant people in Southeastern Asia for 600 years. The center of this culture was in Cambodia and flourished from about 800 AD to 1432, although the history of these Khmers may well be traced back to an earlier period. So, I mean, this is just all groundbreaking stuff that we enjoy reading in our spare time, believe it or not. But for the most part, a lot of our research, which comes from Rashidi, is all just a way to bring this information together. And I know if you watch the video where he presents all this information about his travels in India and other parts of the world to establish this link between all of us, he shows you some really great pictures that he took in the journey. And it's all housed in that book. Would you mind holding that up for him again,
Yeah,
guys?
no question. Yeah, this book here.
And if you can just get past this, the language barriers that our people have, the fact that some of us have really frizzy or curly or coarse hair and straight hair, once you can get past all of that and study the whole idea of genetics and phenotypical traits, then it's way easier to make a connection.
Yeah, for sure. And I was telling the guy Drew about this earlier, and I can't remember which explorer it was who said it, but he, to paraphrase, he was basically like, there's two types of people, of Ethiopians that you're going to meet. Ethiopians just means like black people. So he was saying you're either going to meet ones that have curly hair or ones that have straight hair. Right? So they knew the separation between us and that we were all the same people. So just because you see a black man with straight hair doesn't mean that he's not black, because it's not dreaded up or nappy.
Right.
Or curly.
Right, it's dominant. To be black means you have the potential to create just about all people, what I mean, or all people. So you have dominant and recessive. So you may have straight hair, you may have curly hair. More than likely you will have curly hair. Dark skin, lighter skin. Like if you looked at the video, you have the San people who are from South Africa. They're said to be the oldest known group of people who have really haven't been influenced by external genetic mixing on the planet. And if you look at their skin, it's kind of a yellowish brownish skin. You know what I mean? So that right there shows you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It doesn't, and again, when we talk about genetic drifts and genetic markers, hopefully some people are not fooled into thinking that genes are just kind of floating around and, hey, we see a person that we like and they just kind of jump into a body. It doesn't work that way. Genetic drifts occur because of when people travel from place to place.
Yeah.
You know, we carry genes, they travel with us.
Yeah.
And, you know, when we repopulate or populate an area and we intermingle, we get married, we have children, we reproduce, then that genetic drift, so to speak, it continues. One of the things that came out in Rashidi's research, as was mentioned by the guy in terms of Champa, I wanted to mention that in reference to the Vietnamese, the Chinese refer to a group of people as classified as the Champa. I have it Champa as well as the Sham. It's called the Champa.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
But they were mariners, and the Chinese refer to them as Kunlun Bo,
Yeah, it's kind of
the vessels of black
Nice.
men.
Right.
So it
You
says,
definitely be the front leader when we go to China for KOS shows.
sure indeed. I'm glad we
You got the
going,
accent.
brother. Hey, we
Uh-huh.
going. We're going to Vietnam, and I'm gonna give y'all a little side note from a colleague that I talked to when she went to Vietnam a couple of years ago. But according to this information, it says that the Champa navigated the currents of the Indian Ocean, ranging from Southeast Asia to Madagascar. So, you know, the text and a lot of the research that supports Rashidi's travels, I mean, it's out there. It's very groundbreaking. Now, on a side note, a colleague of mine, she visited Vietnam. She specifically went, actually, she went to both parts. Let's just say for now, she went to what's known as South Vietnam.
Okay.
And one of the things that I was trying to establish was how Vietnamese did Vietnamese identify with the darker our people in the world. And quite frankly, I mean, I'm just gonna be honest and be point blank with some of you. If you can't identify with black people, then you must be white. There is no in between. You can't keep saying, "Well, I'm kind of this and I'm kind of that." I mean, we're bringing this idea of genetics and phenotypical traits to your front door, and you can't walk away and saying like, "Well, I'm not black." Okay, listen, we're not teaching that our people are black so that you can identify, so to kind of place you in this bastardized culture that you're seeing our people living out in various parts of the world, specifically in America. So black, as it has a certain stigma attached to it, we're not trying to associate you with these people on your videos. You know what I mean? Who are talking about mayhem and all these other types of things. Yeah, man. Everything else that doesn't have anything to do with being civilized. We're referring to, again, our genetic history. So anyway, my colleague basically said that, first of all, she didn't see any black people in Vietnam, which, you know, of course, I didn't I didn't want to just jump in and say, "What do you mean?"
You were around them the whole time.
You know, but our whole concept of black, and we all come from that before we had knowledge of self. We thought the same way, that, you know, well, he's not black because he's Chinese. But, you know, no one ever taught us to dig deeper into history and figure out where we all come from.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you look at, for example, an Ethiopian and then someone from the San tribe, completely different looks. One has more of an Asian look, you know, has your slanted eyes, higher cheekbones, and brownish yellow skin. Whereas Ethiopians, even within the Ethiopians, you have some that are very dark, some have more of a brown skin, some have very curly hair, long hair. And these are people that are some of the oldest people on the planet. So this shows you that there's both sides of the coin when it comes to just people that live in that region.
Right.
So when you get to traveling all over the world and, you know, you migrate over, millions of years, you're going to see differences.
But you adjust to your environment.
Exactly. But always come back to that foundation, and once you come back to that, you can see the similarities and what, you know, connects us as a people.
Right.
So on that note, why don't we go ahead and take a break, and when we come back, we'll be building a little bit about the Japanese as being original people, and the Philippines, and other things that we have coming at you. with the Knowledge of Self radio show. Peace.
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 Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge of Self radio show. My name is Teray Allah.
Peace. Jakil Allah.
Peace, Jawullah.
And before we left you, we were talking about the black presence in Southeast Asia. And again, you know, this is a wealth of information that we've chopped down for you to present to you in a short period of time. So anytime you hear references in terms of books, the names of people, regions, we always encourage you to do your own research and cross-reference these things. Because again, you should never take anything on face value. Try to find your own information and, you know, see what you can do with it, and then share with others if it's been proven as being knowledge. So I wanted to open this up to briefly talk about the black presence in early Japan. And again, Runoko Rashidi is one of several scholars who has written about this quite extensively. One of the things that came out in our research is the idea that an old Stone Age hut was found in Japan. And an article came out in the Associated Press February 15th, 1986, which said, quote, "The oldest Stone Age hut in Japan has been unearthed near Osaka. Archaeologists date the hut to about 22,000 years ago and say it resembles the dugouts of African Bushmen. According to Wazuo, it's spelled W-A-Z-U-O, Hiros of Osaka Prefectural of Education's Cultural Division. Other homes almost as old have been found before, but this discovery is significant because the shape is cleaner, better preserved, and is similar to the Africans' dugouts. So, I mean, I know we can make a ton of connections with this in terms of how many of the structures were built in Africa. So, I think one thing that came out in just my observations of looking at the different ways we built things, specifically in Africa, generally they were made, and you have to think about huts have a different sort of structure in Africa as opposed to the huts that were made in other parts of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Like most people just say, "Oh, a hut, it just has a grass roof," but really these were more or less considered domes. Okay, and there's a lot of evidence of the sort of the smaller structures that still exist in Japan.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the things that I wanted to also refer all of you to is a quote by an anthropologist. His name is Roland B. Dixon, and he wrote that, quote, "This earliest population of Japan were in the main a blend of proto-Australoid and proto-Negroid types, and thus similar in the ancient underlying stratum of the population, southward along the whole coast and throughout Indochina and beyond to India itself." One of the things that kind of came out was this idea in Ivan Van Sertima's They Came Before Columbus. And I remember the god Jarul, he did introduce the idea of the Olmec civilization and their encounter with the Americas. So one of the things that's interesting about this quote right here is the fact that there were three waves of these travelers or these pioneers mentioned by Ivan Van Sertima. And he kind of classified them. I'm sure he just did that just to please anthropologists. But he classified them as the three waves of these pioneers, which established the Olmec civilization in the Americas, modern-day Mexico, Guatemala, Salvador, and all the other places in south of the United States. He classified them as Negroid, Caucasoid, and Mongoloid. And these three waves, they traveled in different parts of the earth. So, that's another reason why, man, when we talk about genetic drifts, you wonder why people in Mexico, they have consistent traits with those of so-called Asians in China.
Right, yeah, and I was going to say, while we were doing research, you sent me some links to look up, and one of those had a picture, and those three girls,
Mm-hmm.
and one of those girls looked like she could have definitely been Latina.
Right.
Yeah, totally. The facial, the tone of skin, everything about it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, like for example, my black woman's mom is from, she's from Mexico. And if you look at her, like, if I didn't hear her speak Spanish, I would think that she's straight up Asian.
Right.
Very dark skin, but she looks very, very Asian, yeah. So, that kind of shows and proves that.
And don't stop there. If you saw the God's Son, you would see one of those traits are very prevalent as well. Mm-hmm. Especially when original children, and I'm talking about those who have more or less will be classified as the frizzy hair. I mean, man, all these classifications are crazy, man. But if you look at some of our children, they do have those phenotypical features or phenotypical traits.
Right.
Now, why they change over a period of time, again, that would deserve further study. But when you look at children nowadays, and you look at some of our brown seed children, you can see, wow, you know what? For a minute there, I thought he or she was Asian. Mm-hmm. Okay, so there's nothing strange about that.
Yeah, I get that a lot.
Yeah.
I get that a lot. Is his mother Asian? But when you think about it, based on what we've already presented and what we're going to continue to present, it shows and proves that we are just one people.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to actually show a picture because for me, I had a hard time initially swallowing that pill of so-called Asians being black, based specifically on their eyes, right?
Mm-hmm.
High cheekbones and eyes. I could see the high cheekbones, but the eyes, I just couldn't get past that. But it wasn't until I came across, the Kalahari Bushmen or the San people, and it just blew me away when I saw these pictures. So I'm gonna just put a picture up real quick. So I mean, it's evidence in those pictures that those traits do exist, and these people are in Southeast Africa, and they're said to be some of the old, if not the oldest, people living on the planet, and they migrated out into what is known as Asia and all over the world, really. So you could see right there that these phenotypical traits do exist in Africa, and they do predate any migration into any other part of the planet.
Wow. And I mean, in terms of modern achievements and the connection between our people, when you go into studying the black presence in Japan, there are a couple of things that come out. First of all, our presence, aside from those domed huts and the structure, which is consistent with the structures in certain parts of Africa, there is one person I wanted to mention. In these terms, just so that you can have a point of reference, okay? But again, when we're referring to someone in Japan and someone in Africa, we refer to them as original people. But just for sake of research, so that you can find these names we're throwing at you, we'll give you those names in regards to heritage. Man, okay. So anyway, there's a gentleman by the name of Sakanoye Tamurumaro, and his name is spelled Sakanouye. His last name is Tamuramaro, and there are several scholars that have mentioned this Japanese military ruler as being of African origin. Most notably, I'll just give these names to you. It says Carter G. Woodson and Charles Harris Wesley wrote a book. It's in a chapter called Africans in History with Others. And the book title is The Negro in Our History. And it quoted Chamberlain on Tamuramaro verbatim, that he was actually of what we would consider African ancestry. And I wanted to read a quote from that text where it says, quote, "The probable number of Negroes who reached the shores of Asia may be estimated somewhat by the wide area over which they were found on that continent. Historians tell us that at one time Negroes were found in all of the countries of southern Asia, bordering the Indian Ocean and along the east coast as far as Japan. There are many interesting stories told by those who reached that distant land, which at that time they called Cipango, and is spelled Cipango. It goes on to say, one of the most prominent characters in Japanese history was a Negro warrior called Sakanoye Tamurumaro. So I think that would be a really interesting lesson in any history class. But I can tell you right now, God, I've never heard of the man's name, and I'm 40 years old. So, I mean, and that's the problem with American education. And as far as I'm concerned, Japanese and Chinese education in those countries, they're not teaching the connection between our people. At the same time, though, you will allow the Wu-Tang Clan to come in and do a concert and curse at your children and smoke blunts in your hotels. No disrespect to the brothers from Wu-Tang, but I'm just saying that. However, you don't want to see any visible scholarship enter the minds of your children, which connects them with this great history that we have on the planet Earth. Right. So, with that being said, I think this show, more than anything, is a very important pillar in our society, if not the world right now. So I wanted to go ahead and take a brief break. And when we come back, we're going to hit you with the last part of the show and talk a little bit about the Black presence in the Philippines, among other countries. Peace.
Peace.
To be alive. I'm wise and I know what time it is now.
Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge Yourself radio show. My name is Teray Allah.
Peace. Jakil Najallah.
Peace to rule Allah.
And before we left, we talked briefly about Japan and the Black presence in Japan. And again, we further encourage you to do your own research in this area. So we wanted to go into a brief discussion about the Philippines. And yes, the Black presence in the Philippines is very prevalent. Those of you who've had any type of travels just in the United States or anywhere else, especially if you wound up in the Philippines, you can't help but notice the amount of dark people in the Philippines and the variety of shades there. I wanted to go ahead and give this over to my brother Shaquille, which has like a brief historical background in terms of the Philippines and their resistance to European colonization quite early on.
Yeah, indeed. Peace. So,
Peace.
a lot of that story, you have Magellan coming into that area via Spain, right? He's representing them. So, the Filipinos, so-called Filipinos at that time, basically go through a lot of subjugation. They're not allowed to.
I'm sorry to cut your wisdom, but because this was something that he told us, could you tell the people where does the Philippines come from, that particular name?
Oh, yeah. So basically the name Philippine, or why they call it the Philippines, is because of King Philip. And so that's why they actually spell it like that. Philippines.
Right.
Yeah.
European.
Right.
Name.
Yeah, so all you so-called Filipinos who call yourself Filipinos are really saying you're property of King Philip and his whole squad.
Right. Just like being considered Hispanic and Latino and all the other names that our people are labeled with. So
Right,
Yeah.
no doubt. But you have a freedom fighter from the Philippines who comes to rescue the people by the name of Lapu Lapu.
Hmm.
And earlier we were talking about the different phenotypes. You know, black people, where you have some with curly hair, right, like the Buddha, or you have some with long straight hair. Lapu Lapu had longer straight hair. But anyway, the story about him is he's the guy responsible for taking the head of Magellan in the Battle of Machete, yeah, which is an island off of Cebu, the capital. And so, you know, he's one of the great freedom fighters. Like you read about the Krishna. I guess we'll have to cover it in another show, but he was, you know, he was another a black brother who was also a freedom fighter for the people.
What did the Spaniards call the original people when they got to the Philippines, so-called Philippines?
Oh, that's a job.
Oh well, no, yeah, they called them Negritos.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah, no doubt.
So if you're coming to a land and you see a people, quite naturally you're gonna call that people by how they look.
Right.
So you're calling them Negritos, meaning small black people,
Exactly.
basically. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so that's very exactly. Yeah, that's interesting. That you know, they definitely knew who they were dealing with when they came there. It wasn't like, who are these people? Let's figure it out. Nah, these are the same people that we encountered in this other part of the world.
And how frustrating must you think that be to Europeans? Like you go to all these new places, new lands,
the new world,
and you see these same people.
Damn, it's
like,
not new.
Right.
You know?
Well, we'll tell you, they were so frustrated they decided to kill him.
Yeah, right.
That's the bottom line, right? I
and
mean,
then change history.
Right. Yeah, shoot some noses off the statues and whiten some statues up.
And lighten some people up too.
Right.
True indeed.
But we putting the noses back on right here on KOS.
True indeed. I think just to segue into the next piece of knowledge, you'll come across the group of people called the Itas. Hopefully I'm pronounced that correctly. I'm sure I'll be correct eventually.
Yeah.
Or they called the Atis, which is also spelled Atis. So these are the people who are referred to as Drew mentioned, the Negritos in the Philippines. And according to this information, again, further research is always good in these areas, but it says that this group of people came about 25,000 years ago to the area known as the Philippines from land bridges off of mainland Asia. And the interesting thing, and it goes back to what the God was saying about the pygmies in terms of the phenotypical traits, they were said to be less than 5 feet tall. And they had black skin, short kinky hair, thick lips, and black noses. And this is the history that'll be given to you by the people in the Philippines if you encounter the right people that know their history.
And they're still around. They're still around. You could Google IETA people or AGTA people, and the video that I played also, you could see the children in the beginning of the video, and there's clear evidence right there of these people being of so-called African descent. You know what I mean?
Wow.
And in fact, these so-called Negritos were known and actually used for a certain amount of time as being a fighting force, like mercenaries, for their first fighting ability.
And it's interesting that you said that, because the Philippines was one of the first 2 countries that led an armed struggle against the European colonizers. The first would be Haiti, and then the Philippines would be next. So,
Also about the Philippines, the southern part of it is still not conquered. Yeah, so they were able to get into the north, but when they got down south, they definitely weren't having that. You can thank the Visayan people for that. Lapu Lapu cutting heads off.
True indeed. So we wanted to roll into the idea of how the yellow seas have been exploited. So just think about all of the groups that we've talked about, from Southeast Asia to China to the Philippines, everywhere else where people are classified as Asians. We also have to remember that those are colonized people. Their history speaks to it. And at the moment, and I can be corrected later, but at the moment I can't really remember any group of Asian people that have not been in some way exploited by European colonizers. So why don't we get into some of the history that actually took place first in America, and then also we'll take you back to China. That's interesting. Take you back to China and talk to you briefly about what's known as the Opium Wars. So I wanted to just give this over to Jarul in terms of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 in the United States. So how was this considered a form of exploitation in terms of Chinese immigrants, and what would later be classified as Chinese Americans?
Well, it's just when you exclude somebody, you basically not letting them in the country. So, they really limited the amount of so-called Chinese people that could enter America at that time to keep the numbers down because they were in fear, like they're always in fear of the dominant genetic carriers, superseding their weaker genetic pool. You know what I mean? So I'm not trying to say that to be disrespectful, but anytime you see a child being born, say from a so-called Caucasian or and a so-called original person, that child is going to be original. You're going to see dominant features come through in that child, whether it be, so-called slanted eyes to darker skin, curly hair, those types of things. So, yeah. So.
And I know one of the things, just when I go back in my studies, that Exclusion Act lasted for several years, well into the 20s, and if it wasn't reinstated again because of what was going on when Japan occupied China. But one of the things that they wanted to definitely do was they wanted to prevent any type of outside influences, meaning immigrants from China, from coming in, and quite possibly what they believe would be them turning the citizens in the United States who were Chinese from, how shall I say,
good sheeple to
undermine,
freedom fighters.
Yeah, I mean, undermine what was considered civilization in America. So the whole idea was if you keep the people from the motherland out, right, you're going to prevent any type of outside influences from coming in.
Yeah, so it lasted 10 years, but it's the same act, but they just changed the name a couple times. So this portion lasted from 1882 to 1990. No, 1882 to 1892.
Okay.
And it's the first time federal law prescribed entry of an ethnic working group on the premise that it endangered the good order of certain localities.
Unbelievable.
The good order of certain localities.
Yeah.
Certain locals. And then if you look at the time period that he said, remember that apparently enslaved Africans were emancipated in 1863. So we're talking about from 1863 to 1882. We're talking about 19 years where you're exploiting another group of newcomers.
Yeah. So they changed the name in 1892 to the Gary Act, and then that lasted to the 1920s.
Who the hell was Gary?
I don't know, Gary.
Why was he acting out on Chinese people?
Yeah.
I think also it should be mentioned if you study American history in terms of Chinese in the Golden State of California. One of the things that's going to come up is how they contributed to the building of the railroads in the United States early on. And if you talk to the right people, they're going to tell you that the Chinese are credited with building the 110 freeway in Los Angeles, of all places.
Wow.
But at the same time, when they were working in those types of situations, they were exploited because, again, they were cheap labor. So if you read a little bit about some of the conditions in the camps that they were housed in, the conditions were similar to what would be given to any slave. Poor working conditions, very hazardous environment, no wages, if any, low wages, and their access to food and proper shelter was not something that was, prevalent in those parts during the time. one of the things I think we all want to talk about is the Japanese war relocation camps in the 40s. So I kind of wanted to give this back to Jarul so we could all build on it. How are the relocation camps a form of exploitation?
Well, you have a people who you know, are basically exploiting for their work, and then all of a sudden, Japan allegedly bombs Pearl Harbor, right? You go to war, declare war against Japan, but the people who are considered Japanese Americans get thrown into camps,
Yeah.
and they're not allowed to basically, exist in the environment that they were existing in.
What's funny about that is, they want to classify these people all the time, right? You're
Mhm.
Japanese American, African American,
Right.
this American. But at that point, those dudes weren't American anything.
Exactly.
They were just Japanese.
Right.
So don't be fooled by the labels, right? Although they say that you're something American, that's where they put that slash there to let you know that you can be cut off from.
And
Right.
that's why we don't like the hyphens, like we said earlier in the show. We don't like those hyphens. And also, I think it should be highlighted because, of course, we're into the unification of the human family. I think one thing that I see that goes on quite a bit with our people in general is that many of us pride ourselves when we meet a companion who happens to be Caucasian, and then all of a sudden there's this loss of identity that takes place over the course of a relationship. In some respects, I think it's really important that we continue to identify ourselves as original people and not get caught up into being pulled in this sort of new idea of the fact that, well, the world is, we live in a colorblind society.
Yeah, that's
Okay, if this were a colorblind society, a lot of the things that you see going on around the world in terms of, a certain group of people in every country not living as well as the quote-unquote higher class in that country. And America's a really good example of that, So I just wanted to kind of throw that out there. Don't lose your identity, you know. Let's go into the Opium Wars.
Hold on. Before we go
ahead,
there, one thing that was interesting to me was that before these actual camps, so-called concentration camps, were built, a lot of the Japanese were held in stables at racetracks.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So if that doesn't give you an indication of how the so-called Caucasian felt about you, then I don't know what will.
Mhm.
Right. Oh, but that was back then.
Oh, things have changed.
Right, and I mean, also the fact that the United States dropped an atomic bomb on Japan, and if anybody knows anything about radiation, it takes millions of years to, I guess, be consumed by the Earth. So technically speaking, it is always going to be there.
Yeah.
Right.
But I mean, they didn't know. Because you always build things and you don't know what it's going to do.
Right.
But you just built it magically.
Yeah, and then they dropped it on the women and children.
Yeah, well, because maybe the first time you did it was an accident,
Ah.
and it, the same results. You're scientific about it, right? Do you get the same results if you drop the same bomb at the same price?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
you do. Yeah.
So science is accidental. You put science in a bomb and just say, let's just see how this is going to work.
See what happens.
And again, that was the other thing that a lot of scholars, the down historians out there about World War II, they always ask, why wasn't that bomb dropped on Germany?
Yeah. Right.
Why did they go and drop it on Japan? Some scholars will say because they didn't want to surrender. Neither did Germany up until the Soviet Union went in and put it to them.
Yeah.
But that's one of those questions a lot of scholars don't want to answer.
Well, I mean, why would you want to kill all those? Where would we be now without all those good German scientists that we took over? Right?
Exactly, and they came here.
Not to mention all the gold and things that were stolen. paintings and all that stuff.
We invested a lot of money in that stuff.
Right.
Yeah. Hey, here's these ideas. Why don't you go ahead and develop that for us? Awesome. Can you stop doing that now? We'd like to take over.
Yeah, so this was under President Roosevelt, 1942, February 1942. It said that they were were given the option to work for $5 a day.
The option.
The option.
Mm.
$5, a whopping $5 a day. When a lot of them had to sell their businesses, homes, to prior to going into these camps.
Yeah.
And sold them for a low rate based on the flooding of the market.
Sounds like someone was able to come up on a lot of great real estate and business for nothing.
Right. So keep this in mind. So when you see gentrification projects popping up, the same signs apply. So keep that in mind. Don't forget history, because then it's going to repeat itself. You know what I mean?
And that takes us to the whole discussion of the reparations that were given to the families of those who were interned, or people who were actually interned in those camps. And it does speak to a lot of different things. One of the reasons why certain groups of people who immigrate, or parents immigrate to the United States, are successful, it has a lot to do with the power structure that is in place at home. So, for example, you'll meet, quite frequently you may meet someone who's Japanese or Chinese, and, you're made privy to the fact that they are quote-unquote wealthy. They're doing really well in this country. Some of that has a lot to do with not only is education in those countries a cultural responsibility. If you're a citizen, you must get educated. But also it has a lot to do with the economic power in their native homeland. So the fact that you're allowing, you live in a country that has developed a really good relationship with your native homeland, the promise that you will also be successful in America, the potential is extremely high. You can speak to a lot of people who immigrate here from Africa. Many of them will tell you that back home, their families would be considered poor. Even though Africa provides natural resources to the whole planet,
right, clean food,
sense. So just with that being said, I wanted to go ahead and briefly mention the Opium Wars.
You tell me about that.
Yeah, I wanted Jarul to take that, because I know a little bit about it, but again, we're just talking about the exploitation of places such as Japan, which we just mentioned, or Japanese people, and now, like I mentioned, we were going to go back and take you to China in the 1830s. So what were the Opium Wars all about, and how did that affect the Chinese civilization in the 1800s?
Well, the Opium Wars are basically between Britain and China. At that time, Chinese ruler was basically had restrictions on what could be imported from Britain, because he knew how Britain got down. He didn't want his people to succumb to these types of drugs and these types of things that would obviously weaken the society and allow access to, external powers to come in.
Yeah.
So, basically the beef came when, he was like, look, you guys can't be importing this stuff in. Britain was getting mad because they were buying a whole bunch of tea from China. And, obviously that's making China rich, but you're not getting anything in return.
Right.
So, Britain just sent gunboats and declared war, and then eventually led to opium being spread all through China. And I think I read that it was something like 2 to 4 million people addicted to opium or something ridiculous like that. Yeah. So.
And that actually led to what would be considered the decline of the Chinese dynasty.
Of course.
Because of so many members of that family being afflicted by the addiction in general.
Man.
Yes, sir.
That sounds familiar. It sounds like symbolic to the so-called civil rights movement. Heroin into the crack epidemic basically destroyed that whole movement.
What they say in the Matrix? This is not the first time we destroyed Zion, and we've become very good at doing it.
Right. And one thing, if you watch some of those some of those old movies. I know The Last Emperor is a really good one to watch. But they had a whole bunch of opium bars, what they called opium bars,
Yeah.
um, that were in China. I mean, it was rampant. And also in America, they had opium bars as well that were run by Chinese people.
Into the Dragon, right? And he was fighting Mr. Handman, and he gets kicked through the wall. All the women are smoked out in that room.
Right. So, you know, I mean, that's just seeing a drug history. And I mean, man, we can go, if we wanted to, we could go into opium and all that stuff. But man, as far as heroin and opium and Southeast Asia are concerned, I mean, that's one drug that leveled that country.
Yeah.
You know, to this day, you can see the aftermath of that.
And then they used to use heroin here in America. I want to say, what's the cowboy movie? Tombstone. And his wife gets addicted on it. She has a tooth pain, and she keeps taking. I think that was an opiate form too.
True indeed. We were using those type cocaine and that to heal ailments. So it's interesting how when people get a hold of things, they turn into a destructive element. So why don't we go ahead and take a break, and we'll come back with the last portion of the show, where we talk about how yellow seeds contributed to the world and how Caucasians benefited from these great contributions. Peace.
Peace.
Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge Yourself radio show. My name is Teray Allah.
Peace. Jakil Allah.
Peace. Jarulullah.
And before we left, we were talking a little bit about some modern history in reference to China's Opium Wars, as well as what happened to the Japanese in the United States during the internment camps of World War II. So with all that being said, we hit you with the origin of our people in places known as Southeast Asia, Japan, and China, among other places. We also want to talk a little bit about how yellow seeds have contributed to our world today, but more importantly, how these contributions have actually always, and they always will, helped and benefited Europeans in their society. So I wanted to give it over to Jarul, and we're just going to kind of go on down the line about, I mean, this is just like a small piece of the multitude of contributions our people have made. So Jarul.
Yeah, the biggest one to me is, obviously still being used today, is gunpowder. It said that In the 9th century, alchemists blended charcoal, salt, pepper, and sulfur into a powder called Hu Yao, which was used to treat skin infections. And then from that, they found that it was highly explosive, and it was transported to Europe in the 13th century, likely over the Silk Road trade routes through Central Asia. Rival nations refined gunpowder recipes in ensuing centuries before arriving at the optimum mixture, which is, I'm not going to tell you the approximate balance. But yeah, so.
There weren't none of you scientists out there.
Exactly. Coming back on me. You know.
Wow. And among other things, one of the things that came out in my research was the flying machine, which would be actually one of the first attempts at people developing some sort of aircraft. It was developed in 1766 BC by, during Emperor Shangtang's reign. And apparently this emperor ordered the construction of this flying machine. And
did he order the Wright brothers to do it?
No, this was way before the Wright brothers. And it said that it was subsequently destroyed after he ordered it to be made. At least anyone discovered the secret of flight. And later it said that in the 3rd century BC, the Chinese poet Chu Yun made a detailed aerial survey of the Gobi Desert, giving special praise to the durability of his craft over wind and sandstorms. So what some people think is that that particular poem was too detailed for it to be written by someone who did not actually observe those things during flight. You know, it was like looking at the Gobi Desert. I mean, the desert is huge.
Right.
So the details are like, well, how is it that he was able to write all these things down?
Probably an alien.
Probably an alien.
UFO picked them up.
Isn't that right? Like everything we do, isn't it an alien? Maybe it's aliens that built those pyramids.
Of course.
Right.
You know, I don't. In terms of defense. I did want to mention, I consider this a contribution because original people were really good or are really good at building something from nothing. It said that the Great Wall of China was made with a combination of rice mortar. So what you're seeing is, you know, when they put those things together, they actually used rice, and if I'm not mistaken, it was limestone to make the Great Wall of China. And of course, you know, scholarship goes back and forth. When you look it up, you're going to find some snippy details. But they say if you're about 100 to 200 miles away from the Earth, you can see the Great Wall of China. But there are some people that they refute that. Right. You know, I mean, but also you can kind of look at some pictures that have been taken and,
from there.
Yeah, I mean from space, and you can actually see the Great Wall of China. But I think the dispute is, can you see it with the naked eye? I mean, come on, man. Can you see God with the naked eye? Of course you can.
So yeah, sure, every Sunday.
So I know Jerome or Jakil, you wanted to hit on with something else in terms of what the Chinese contributed.
Yeah, you know, actually, there's lots of things we had on the list: seismograph, magnet, and a compass. But I know earlier we talked about martial arts and how that happens. We didn't get to give that story, so I wanted to
please do
hit
tell
the story. So the Buddha Dharma came down from what is known as India, and so he was a black man, and he traveled through to get to China. He stopped at other different peoples, but he's the one who developed the Shaolin Kung Fu system, and so that's where you get China's big introduction into martial arts, and then, you know, their father developed it into different systems as we see it today. But so one of the contributions that they get credited for is Kung Fu and martial arts, which we know comes from India, and that dates back even farther to Africa.
Yeah.
But so, you know, definitely Chinese and different systems of like Qigong, breathing exercises, strengthening exercise to make you stronger, and natural health practices. It's definitely a contribution that we get from China.
True indeed.
Steve.
Also in the United States, I remember it's said that the Chinese introduced the apple to the United States.
The apple?
Yes, the apple and the orange. That's what it said.
Really?
That's what it said. There's a really good documentary out there. Unfortunately, viewed it so many years ago, but it does talk about the history of China. And one of the things that they do mention on that documentary is how there was an emperor in China around the 14th century that actually was said to visit Mexico. I mean, I can't remember the name of that, but I believe it came out on the History Channel. So
Okay.
I'm trying to find the title. We can watch it and eat some oranges and popcorn or something. But
and light some firecrackers.
yeah,
right?
true indeed. And I mean, there's so much information out there, man. I mean, in terms of who we are as a people, we can claim any part of the earth and help us better define ourselves, even if we were born here in the United States.
Mhm.
You can look over there in Ankara and see your image in those statues over there.
Right. Also, you could just go to the outskirts of a lot of these major cities, all over the world, and you can see those people still exist.
Right.
You know, whether it's the Ottoman people, the Atta people,
And live in color.
right? So it's just you got to open your eyes and look.
True indeed. So, it was a great show. We wanted to thank all of you for joining us today. And, of course, before we leave, we wanted to hit you with what to read, view, and do. We wanted to let Jarul take it first leg.
Okay, yeah. First and foremost, you got to obviously do the knowledge of this book here, like we said earlier, African Presence in Early Asia
Yeah.
by Runoko Rashidi. It basically has various different articles from different people, so it's not just his point of view. It's various different points of view, and it doesn't only just cover so-called Asians, but it also goes into India and how they're connected to Ethiopia and things of that nature too. So yeah,
Yeah, and that discussion is coming soon.
yeah, that's coming
y'all.
soon. That's coming soon.
To view, we said that we'd like you to view The Black Chinese. That's what it's titled on YouTube.com and The Human Tree. And what do we do, Brett?
Yeah, to do, we want you to take your kids to a museum to go learn specifically about yellow seed or Asian history. So make sure you do that. Take some pictures and post them on the website.
Definitely. And remember, when you learn about their history, you're learning about your history
No
too.
doubt.
You know what I mean?
And that's the thing. Their and your.
Right.
They just can't put them in the same
Right.
ballpark.
Right.
Yeah, it's our history.
It's our
True
history.
Indeed. So I'd like to thank my righteous brothers, Jakil Knowledge Allah and Jarul Allah, for building with us, building with me today. We love doing this for y'all. And we like to say peace on behalf of the Knowledge Self Radio Show. Oh, last thing. I'd like to say peace to Life Allah, our producer of the show out there.
Peace to the God.
And again, do y'all want to add on and say any?
Just definitely, if you haven't subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/KOS, the number 9 radio. I know you want to mention the Facebook.
Yeah, get on that Facebook group. The group is Knowledge Self Radio Show. Post some pictures, make some comments.
Yeah, we love your comments, man. We love the feedback, and we love the fact that you're benefiting from the show.
Right.
So we just like to say peace to y'all, and take care of your families. Peace.
Peace.
Peace.